Joining us now is Tom Fitton. He is the president of Judicial Watch. And I've been dying to talk to you about the Twitter story, Tom. And I got to ask you, what do you make of this revelation that Twitter was not only was Twitter in bed apparently with the CIA, but was getting paid millions of dollars by the FBI?
Well, the truth is often worse than the worst, than the worst conspiracy theories. I don't know how else to describe it. The idea that you had the intelligence agency that's supposed to be spying on foreign nationals and operating really abroad, meeting regularly with Twitter to as part of some program to suppress American citizens who were concerned about election integrity a bit before 2020. It's just incredible.
Tom, I got to ask you, I'm sure you've been following all of the releases of the Twitter files, and we've seen agency after agency pressuring Twitter, who didn't really need too much pressure to go along with the program. But what recourse do we have? It seems like there's definitely some constitutional issues here, First Amendment. So what recourse does anyone have? I know there's going to be congressional hearings. Not particularly optimistic about those, but what do you think? What are the next steps here?
Well, Judicial Watch is suing the California Secretary of State's office, who in 2020 was doing what the CIA and FBI was doing, which is trying to get Twitter and YouTube and company to take down videos and tweets and such. In the case of Judicial Watch, YouTube took down a video. And so we just sued the California Secretary of State's office under the Ku Klux Klan Act over violations of our civil rights, the First and 14th Amendments. And, those are that's the kind of area of laws or group of laws that apply here. My understanding is, I'm not a lawyer, but, when the government violates your rights like this in collusion with private companies, potentially both entities are in trouble. And so when you have the FBI saying, take down this tweet, or any other government agency, and tweets are taken down or individuals are deplatformed, then there are potential civil rights violations that have, as I was describing earlier, civil liability. People can sue. And then there's a criminal liability potentially as well. The most recent revelations yesterday have, the FBI the Biden White House, it sounds like, very angry that Twitter isn't deleting people's accounts that they wanted deleted over vaccine disinformation and other issues. And, does anyone think the Biden DOJ is going to investigate the Biden White House? They've been quite public in promoting their censorship agenda. So that's the challenge. Maybe it'll be part of the impeachment of Biden. Who knows?
Well, yeah, there's that piece by Katie Pavlich that's talking about this as a potential impeachable offense. Let me dial it back a little bit. I had a conversation yesterday with Joe DeGeneva, the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. I hadn't realized that Joe had been a staffer on the Church Committee of the Senate Committee investigating abuses within the intelligence community in the 1970s. And Joe was saying yesterday, and I am inclined to agree with this, I want to get your take, it is time for a modern church committee. I mean, as we're doing all of this oversight, or let me ask you, is it time for a modern version of the church committee to engage in this oversight of abuses by the intelligence community and then to offer up recommendations for reform?
I don't oppose necessarily congressional investigations, but, so we're going to have another church committee to update what the last church committee said that was ignored for the last 30 or 40 years since it was impaneled. So, the law prohibits what was going on here. I mean, do we need an investigation committee or do we need accountability? And, my concern is that, just the other day, for instance, in the face of this news that the FBI was censoring Americans, you had Republicans and Democrats in the Senate get together to vote to give them all the money that they could get,
Right.
Without any check on what they've done. So my view is, we kind of know what's been done is wrong. The question is, what is the accountability? Is there going to be funding accountability? Are individuals going to be fired? Are there going to be prosecutions? Is there going to be litigation? That's what I'm more interested in than policy changes, which, the policies are, they're not allowed to do this, and they're doing it anyway. We don't need, I'm not necessarily opposed to it.
Sure.
But let's get right to it then.
I appreciate that. Liz, go ahead.
Tom, do you think that this is not just with Twitter? I mean, how many other corporations that are in the communication space is the government and the intelligence community involved in? Maybe Instagram, Facebook, even like Verizon or larger companies. How far do you think that this goes?
Well, there's little doubt that the other companies aren't involved in it, at least based on these Twitter spaces, these Twitter files that are being released. The documents and the documents show that the meetings were taking place with other companies as well. And however outrageous what is going on Twitter, it pales in comparison to Facebook, and which owns, Meta owns Facebook and Instagram. Google owns YouTube. Those two companies have a far greater reach and number of users than Twitter. Yeah. So the censorship over there is much more significant in the sense that it impacts, billions more in many respects, and it's ongoing. So, unlike Elon Musk, who is ratcheting back the censorship, there's no sign that's going on over at Facebook and YouTube. I mean, for instance, if I say the word COVID and on Facebook or Twitter, or YouTube, it gets vandalized with a message about COVID. Right. In the case of Facebook, it suppresses the ability of one to share it. People are warned, you sure you want to share this? Fitton said COVID. So this is, and now we know, or, it's further confirmed, it all has the blessings and there's this pressure campaign from the Biden gang to encourage and continue and increase this censorship.
Got it. Well, we are going to continue our conversation with Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, but first it's 8:15 a.m. Talking with Tom Fitton, he is the president of Judicial Watch. And Tom, since the last time you're going to be on O'Connor and Company in 2022, well, let's sort of look back over the year. What do you look back at, sort of the biggest story for you guys for 2022?
Well, I think the story we've been talking about is pretty darn big. It would be hard to top the effort to suppress information being confirmed just before the 2020 elections. Massive election interference by the FBI and the big tech social companies, and to benefit one candidate, Joe Biden, to the detriment of another, President Trump. And of course, we've had this. I think it's all tied in some respects. This massive abuse over the last year by the January 6th committee, which has culminated in a smear and effort to jail Trump. So there's a whole side of the political spectrum, unfortunately, and ideology, a left-wing ideology that wants to censor its opponents and put them in jail. And I think it's a pretty disturbing development for modern America.
Liz, go right ahead.
Tom, what's coming up for Judicial Watch in 2023? You guys have been so effective, definitely more effective than our own traditional checks and balances and oversight mechanisms. So where are you going to be plowing forward in 2023?
Well, we're continuing on this election integrity fight, where we've been suing states and counties and such to get them to clean up the voter rolls. I mean, if they're going to be doing vote by mail, which I don't like, the least they can do is to make sure that people are actually living there or eligible to vote before they get sent ballots.
Amazing.
Or opportunities to participate. And we've had some great success just in the last year in doing that. North Carolina cleaned up almost 500,000 names. We ended the lawsuit. And I suspect other states are going to follow suit. And if they don't, we're going to be suing. And the other big issue is accountability over COVID and the vaccines. We've been front and center in getting that information out there, whether it be on Fauci's gain-of-function research, the failure to conduct sensible COVID vaccine studies that we've exposed, and other big issues. And I think that's going to be of great interest. And then, of course, we've got the elephant in the room, which is Biden family corruption.
Right.
We have many FOIA lawsuits on that happening. And I think that's going to be a big issue in 2023. The Republicans, however, haplessly are going to get into it. And certainly Judicial Watch has enough lawsuits and ongoing cases set up that there's going to be a critical mass of information coming out about Biden family corruption. And now, we're facing this imminent crisis of the border, right. Which is, already at invasion stage. Can it get worse? It probably will, and that's going to be concerning to any fair-minded American.
Tom, before we let you go, just talk a little bit about to our listeners, right? Because there are a lot of folks who are like, well, why are we going to go back and talk about the Hunter Biden laptop? Isn't that story over? This goes well beyond the Hunter Biden laptop. We need to know if the vice president's office during the Obama administration was for sale. Talk about why that's important moving forward.
Well, because there's a war in Ukraine, right. And there's a war, and there's a potential security threat beyond what we've seen in the last few decades from China. And the question is, are those two countries, Russia, China, well, in the case of Ukraine, Ukraine too, obviously, so 3 countries, and who knows what others, are we in situations with them that we otherwise wouldn't be, because the leadership of China, Russia, and Ukraine know Biden's corrupt, and they're playing him.
Yeah.
And they've made a calculation to engage in adventurism or, otherwise demand support because Biden's been on the take. I mean, shouldn't we check that out?
100%, right? I mean, this is the fundamental issue over whether or not, right? And it's not even whether or not U.S. policy actually changed because of it. Even if Joe Biden tried to influence policy based upon the lobbying efforts of his son and the business relationships that his son had with entities that had deep relationships with foreign governments, we have a right to know as Americans in the same way, right? And we never got the answers about the relationships between entities that were donors to the Clinton Foundation and were doing business with the State Department while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and were clients of Teneo Holdings while her senior advisors were double dipping. I mean, right. We never got that full story. And it's important for us to know these things because Americans have a right to know that their government isn't corrupt. Tom Fitton, listen, happiest, merriest of Christmases to you, happiest of New Year's. We look forward to talking to you in 2023.
Yes, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you both. God bless America.